Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beastly Talks. As always, I'm your host, Ian Helling, and this podcast may not come out. I'm not 100% sure yet, and it's not because it's something particularly controversial or anything, but if you don't follow me on social media, you might not know what's going on with my technological situation. So, a couple of weeks ago, I posted on social media that I had a podcast that was meant to come out, but it didn't come out. And the reason for that is that I woke up one day, I opened my 6-month-old, very expensive, almost brand new Apple MacBook Pro, and my computer said no. It essentially wouldn't turn on. So I took it back to the place that I bought it from, and they said, yeah, this is fucked up, and we have to send it away. And it was going to be 4 to 6 weeks until I got it back. So that was a little bit of a kick in the dick, but it needs to be fixed and I need to have a computer and all of that. Now, I actually got that computer back yesterday. And guess what? I opened it up. Everything was working perfectly. I started downloading and installing all the software that I use, all the programs. It took me about 4 hours to get the thing fully set up, email, transferring things, blah, blah, blah. Everything was working perfectly well. Then I shut the thing. I put it in my office. And when I woke up the day after and walked into my office, ready for a big day of doing a ton of work that I hadn't done in the last 4 weeks, guess which fucker decided not to turn on again? So here we are. Once again, I'm without a laptop for the foreseeable future. Now, I am recording this on an ancient piece of machinery. Like, this thing is probably about 15 years old, and it has the processing power of a fucking fry pan. So I'm not actually sure if it's going to be able to record and store everything, but you know what? I'm going to give it a red hot go. So I've decided to talk about a topic that I want to try and make reasonably quick, simple, and short. So not my usual rambling, super long podcast, but this will hopefully be a slightly shorter one. And essentially, I want to talk about the difference between reactivity and aggression. Because I often see, I see these two terms used interchangeably as if they are the same thing. I also see the opposite, where some people say that one exists and the other one doesn't. Like, I've read the crazy fucking things on the internet, as I'm sure many of you have, but I've seen people say that there is no such thing as reactivity. It is only aggression. So any form of over-arousal that leads to a display of behavior that we would call reactive is actually aggression. And on the flip side, I've said that other people will say that aggression doesn't exist, right? There is no such thing as true aggression, and everything is reactivity. And fuck, this industry is so fucking retarded. I don't even know where to begin. But I'm gonna try, and what I'm hoping to do with this podcast is try to be a little bit of a sensible beacon of light in the midst of all the fucking shit that's being spread on social media. So, without further ado, let's fucking get stuck into this. Now, there is a lot of talk about whether or not the term reactivity is actually the correct term. And a lot of people even don't like the term reactivity because they don't think it actually encompasses what that massive display of kind of out of control aggression that we sometimes see from dogs on leash. Like, no one can really seem to fall back on what that actually is. And again, I don't mind the word reactivity because I think it kind of in my head encompasses pretty well what is actually going on. But when I explain reactivity to my students and my clients, I always talk about it as being overly reactionary. Right. So reactivity to me is a dog that sees something that it generally shouldn't care about at all because it doesn't really affect their life. It doesn't make their life worse or better. It's something they should be neutral to, but they have a massive overreaction to it. So they start backflipping on the leash, screaming into the skies, just doing mental shit over something that really should just be as uninteresting as a rock on the side of the road. So again, the term reactivity, a lot of people don't like it. Now, I was incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to speak to an ethologist and dog trainer, a man called Roberto Barata. Now, if I mispronounce that last name, I apologize. But I was able to have a chat to Roberto. Now, he's a world famous ethologist and dog trainer. And ethology is an interesting one. So it's a little bit of a different look at how we keep domesticated animals. Now, ethology, while it studies and is the science of behavior, it kind of comes from behavior more from an evolutionary perspective, so more of a Darwinian view of why behavior has come about and why it exists, rather than more of an operant approach through reinforcement and punishment that a lot of dog training is more focused on. Now, please understand that I'm not saying that these two things are mutually exclusive, right? So in mythology, they also talk about operant conditioning and reinforcement and punishment and creation of behavior and cessation of behavior. But I guess ethology, in my understanding and what I talked to Roberto about, is that they're always looking at why is the behavior coming about? Why is the dog barking? Right? Why is the dog lunging on leash? There has to be a purpose for the behavior. Um, Now, in my opinion, there is a pretty clear purpose to reactive behavior. And like the vast majority of reactivity that we see, it essentially comes from three places. If you want to break it down all the way, in general, it comes from three places, and that is frustration. Those frustrated because it's being restrained, can't control its space around, can't do whatever it wants. It is over aroused, which is essentially can be an excitement type behavior, like it really wants to go and do something, but is blocked from doing that thing, or it can come from fear and anxiety. And all of these things kind of drive the emotional state in the dog to a point where they begin overreacting to something. And as I've talked about in past podcasts, the general purpose of aggressive behavior is to control space, right? It's if you're fearful of something, you try and use aggressive behavior to drive the other thing away. You can also use aggression in terms of predation to bring things closer. You can use it in a domineering way where you're trying to overpower another dog or animal and try push them out of the way, get them to submit, to give up, trying to take space from you, right? And there are so many different types of aggressive behavior, but at the end of the day, most of them, if not all, I'm never going to say all because you can never say all or nothing, really. Because there is always going to be that one thing that is different from everything else. And that's what keeps dog training so interesting. And so from that point of view, when you look at, frustration, fear, anxiety, and over arousal driving behavior, to me, that seems purposeful. So while actual aggression over centuries has maybe evolved towards very specific purpose, in the world that the dogs we lived with, the world that they live in now, the world that is designed for us humans and not really for, you know, predators, um, that emotional dysregulation can bring about a lot of these behaviors. And therefore, I do not mind the term reactivity. It is a little bit vague. It is very much a catch-all phrase, but I personally have not been able to think of a better word for it. So I'm going to stick with it for now. But yeah, think of reactivity not just as some random thing that happens. It's the dog literally overreacting to something that it shouldn't really care about. Okay, so getting into the difference between reactivity and aggression, the way that I see it. To break it down very simply, reactivity is loud and erratic. Aggression is quiet and purpose-driven. That is the best way that I personally can break it down. So reactivity tends to have a lot of big emotions behind it. It's lunging, its tail's wagging. It is the dog spinning on a leash. It's barking, it's backflipping, its ears are up and down, it's flickering back and forth. It's very chaotic, and it's very big in demonstration of aggressive behavior. Now, actual aggression, is actually very subtle and very pointed in a particular direction. So, and look, I should say purpose driven as well. Like that is important because reactivity doesn't really tend to have a purpose outside of, I don't know how to deal with my emotions, so I'm just going to fucking scream and kick till things change in a manner that suits me. Whereas aggression is very clear on exactly what outcome it desires. So further to that, again, like we talked about, reactivity is driven by over arousal. So I've talked a lot about arousal in the past, but essentially the body gets flooded with cortisol, dopamine, and adrenaline, and it prepares the dog for a big reaction, whether that is running away, whether that's kicking into fight or flight, essentially. Is it running away from something, or is it trying to fight something off? But reactivity in general does not have a clear intent to harm. That is one of the big differences. So it tends to be, again, loud, frantic, not very directed, but often redirected. And so what I mean by that is a lot of, like say, for example, if you're walking two dogs together and they both have dog reactivity, right? So they see a dog in the distance and they start blowing up. Again, the reason for that can be many. It could be that they want to get to meet the dog. They're frustrated greeters. It could be that they've had a bad experience with other dogs in the past. They're fearful of them and want to try to drive them away. But they see another dog and they start blowing up. They start zigzagging on the leash. They start spinning. They start backflipping, kicking their legs, start biting the leash, whatever it may be. Now, very often, if you have two dogs like that, they can actually redirect onto each other. So they start like snapping in each other's faces and even biting each other, right? This is something we often see in fence fighting. So you have two dogs that are at a fence that is out towards a busy road. And every time a person walks past, these two dogs go like, hey, you get the fuck off my lawn. They start running up and down. They start barking. They start screaming. They're jumping over each other. They're crashing into each other. And they get more and more frustrated because they're being held back by the fence, right? And so that doesn't satiate the desire to rush up to the thing, to maybe nip at it, to drive it away. And so now what can happen as they get more and more frustrated, one of the dogs will hit that point where they go like, there is so much frustration and I am absolutely losing control of myself. I don't know where to put this frustration. I need to take it out on something. You're the closest thing. You're the only thing here. So I'm going to turn around and an actual fight between the two dogs that live together starts at the fence. Now, if you have a single dog, they might actually run and bite like a stick or a tree or a ball or a toy or something to like shake it and try and get that shit out of their system. But yeah, what we tend to see in terms of actual changes in the dog's body is we tend to see a very stiff but fast wagging tail, the scorpion tail, the classic like curved up tail that is pointing towards something almost. We see obviously lunging, very often see spinning on the leash, especially with smaller dogs because they kind of lunge forward as they hit the leash with so much intensity that they spin around and they kind of continue spinning after that. The barking like into the air, like they're not actually barking at something. They tend to be barking low, straightforward, up, around, left, right, center. They can be jumping, running backwards, and then lunging forwards again, zigzagging. Again, all of this is very chaotic. It's chaotic. It's all over the place. And I guess it's what, like, if you're not a seasoned fighter and you get into a fight, a bar fight, for example, you are just swinging. Right, you're screaming, you're kicking, you're hitting people you're not meant to be hitting. Like you're just reacting to the situation that you're in, which is very different from an actual like MMA fighter or a boxer that is trained to target a specific person with their aggression. So again, that brings us into the aggression side of things, right? Aggression is driven more by a clear intent to threaten or harm. So from a dog body language point of view, actual proper aggression tends to be very targeted, very steadfast. And so it's low, deep growling. It is lip curling. It is direct eye contact. Like the dog isn't shying away. It is looking you directly in the eye. And it's a very stiff, stationary posture. Like the whole body is almost like a pressure cooker. It is just like pushing muscles out to, to their limit to get that dog ready for a very purposeful and forwards motion with a clear intent to threaten or harm. And so that's kind of the big difference between the two. Loud, erratic, chaotic, and actually quiet, targeted, and purposeful. That's primarily how I look at the difference between reactivity and aggression. And so I walked into very, very many people's houses where, I knock on the door. Essentially what I always say is when I knock on someone's door, if I hear barking, I know I've got the right address, right? That's a very common thing. Now, that doesn't mean the dog is extremely reactive when you come into the house, but, we have a lot of dogs that struggle with having guests or visitors come to the house. So at that point, you knock on the door, they're screaming, you hear rattling behind the door as someone's trying to get a leash on the dog, they're tripping over shoes and shells and whatever the fuck. And then eventually the door opens and the dog is just straining on the leash. It is
half barking, half screaming, choking itself out. It's very over the top. It's almost like bad acting. Because they're like, hey, I'm going to make such a big fucking point out of this that hopefully you'll go away and I will feel less fearful. Or if it's like a super overexcitable dog that loves people, the reactivity can come in the form of like rushing up to them and barking and jumping at them, headbutting them. Like I've literally had dogs jump so high they've nearly given me a black eye. And I'm 6'5", which is 196 centimeters, depending on where you're listening to this from. And so all of these, they're very over the top. They're very intense behaviors. Well, they seem intense, but they're actually more just chaotic. Then on the flip side of that, I had walked into other people's houses where I take a step in, like I knock on the door, there might be a couple of barks. That's very common, right? Because the dog's alerting to the fact that something's there. That's kind of why we kept dogs around 10,000 years ago. Or some people say 40,000 years. I don't know the actual science behind that, but for however many thousands of decades ago, we started keeping dogs around. It was, hey, if someone comes to my camp, they might be here to steal my food or kill me. You got to let me know so I can wake up and try and kill them first. That was the original purpose of having a dog around. Then over time, with evolution, with breeding, with training them for a specific thing, we started using them to help us hunt, etc., etc. But the initial human-dog contact, as far as we know, was to go, hey, fucking someone's at the door. Let me know. That's why so many people struggle with this, and that's why so many dogs are overly door reactive, right? Because fucking 10,000 years of evolution, or 40,000 years, or however many thousands of years you think that it's been going on for. So all of these are, again, whether it's reactivity, whether it's aggression, all of this is natural, right? Being aggressive is not abnormal. It's not unnatural in any way, form, or shape. But obviously, as with everything, it can get really out of control and become a huge problem in this world that we live in today. Okay, so leaving the door and coming back to walking into the house of an actual aggressive dog. Now, again, knock on the door, you hear some barking, you hear some clipping of leashes, dog gets moved away, door opens. I walk into the house and the dog just fucking locks eyes with me. It looks me dead in the eyes, and usually within 2 to 5 seconds, it's a deep guttural growl. Now, that tells me, in very many cases, that this dog is like, hey, bro, if you come closer, I will fuck you up. I will use my teeth, I will use my muscles, and I will injure you. I will come after you. Now, there are some dogs that are generally very reactive, who become extremely fearful and shy when someone walks into the house. So this can be mistaken, right? You can have a dog that's kind of sitting in a corner, trembling, shaking, and just side-eyeing you and then looking away, and then they growl. And that can sound like a pretty deep, intense, scary growl. And that's not really what I'm talking about here when I'm talking about proper aggression. I'm talking about a dog that looks you dead in the eyes and goes like, bro, I will fight you and I will fucking win. Like, I am not scared of you. I am coming for you if I get the chance. And those fucking Jeffrey Dahmer dogs, I've seen dogs that are hunting people. Like, these I can't remember who this was, but I was at a workshop with an American trainer, Josh Moran, possibly. I can't remember exactly, but they had this dog that everyone was kind of hyping up. And this was a dog aggression workshop, so there were lots of dogs coming out. They were barking, they were screaming, they were lunging, they were, trying to nip and bite. But when this dog came out of the crate, this dog came out hunting. Right, the crate door opens. The handler, I don't think it was the owner, I think it was a handler or a trainer or something, that was holding the leash, just held the leash, and after the crate door opened, nothing happened. Right, this was kind of like a closed crate, so you couldn't see the dog inside. But the door opens, and this thing, after a couple of seconds, like, he took his time. Like, this dog isn't scared, he isn't rushing through the door. But after a few seconds, he comes walking out like nonchalantly. And when his whole body was out of the crate, he literally just scanned from left to right like I fucking every single person in that room. Now that, to me, is a fucking dangerous dog. That is a dog that just goes like, hey, I'm not scared. I'm ready to go. Like, anyone. Doesn't matter your size, doesn't matter your skin color, your gender, your skill. I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm coming for you if you come close to me. And those, like, dogs, they're the ones you should be fearful of. And again, like, going back to the whole idea of a bar fight, like, if you're in a bar and some guy is like ripping his shirt off and beating his chest and screaming and getting up in people's faces, he's generally not really the guy that you need to be worried about. It's the quiet guy in the corner smiling and fiddling with a knife that's actually the dangerous one. So yeah, that's pretty much how I break it down. Reactivity, chaotic, loud, uncontrollable, purposeless aggression, calm, directed, targeted, with intent to threaten or harm. All right, so on a day-to-day basis, here is examples of, what I would call reactivity and what I would call aggression. Like, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just to kind of give you a real life idea of which one's which. So obviously the most common is leash reactivity. So you have a dog that's on leash, they're usually pulling on leash, they're usually on either a halty that they're fighting as fuck because it hurts them, or they're on a harness which makes them just pull even more. Their arousal is through the roof and they start lunging and barking at pretty much anything they see that exists, whether that is a car, jogger, bicycle, another dog, another human being, the man in the blue hat that we often talk about in dog training, like just umbrellas. Like, they can just react to all kinds of stuff, right? Sound sensitivity is one that a lot of people forget about. So a lot of dogs are quite sound sensitive. And so any form of like loud, unpredictable sound, like dropping something in the kitchen, thunder and lightning, a big truck going past the house, like, that can kick off a lot of reactivity because the dog doesn't know what it is. It's a loud, unexpected sound. And because a lot of reactive dogs are kind of trapped in that cycle of over-arousal and anxiety, they are just on a hair trigger all the time. They are just waiting for something to happen that they can lose their shit out, right? Doorway rushing. So, you have dogs that rush through the door the second you open it. And that kind of sets the dog in a state of mind where they're like, hey, I'm ready to fight or bark at anything that fucking moves, right? And so this is why, and I want to do a podcast on this as well, like, what is dominance and what is just having some good fucking manners, because rushing through doorways is a big problem, and it's something that I'm pretty firm on with pretty much any reactive or aggressive dog that I work with. But yeah, you see, all of this, it It's fast, it's loud, it's intense, it's uncontrollable. Whereas aggression examples, I think, obviously actual dog or human aggression, human aggression, where the dog is kind of looking at a dog or human as an adversary to take down, to injure, to maim. It's not super common, right? It's actually not very common at all. Like from what I see on social media and the fucking reels that are being promoted to me, you'd think every second cunt courser actually wants to like rip a human's head off, or every pit bull wants to tear a baby apart. Like, it's not actually as common as it is promoted. Like true dog or human aggression, like I am gonna fight you, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna rip you up, and I'm gonna dismantle you till you're dead. But it does happen, absolutely. But it's not as common as most people think. Now, two of the most common things that I tend to see is resource guarding and territorial aggression. So resource guarding, I don't think I've ever seen any form of resource guarding that I would call reactive. Because when that dog is hunching over a bone or a toy and it's looking you directly in its eye, like looking you directly in the eyes, and those pupils are dilating and that lip is curling and the low growl is coming out, if you step closer at that point, that dog is going to hurt you, most likely. It is going to bite and it's going to hold and it's going to shake, right? So resource guarding is a very normal thing to, well, it is a very purposeful thing. Like, I'm scared of losing this thing, or I'm ready to compete with you over this thing. The misconception that all resource guarding is fear of losing a resource is just completely fucking wrong. Because some dogs want to fight you over things. Just look at like proper protection dog bred, Malinois, German Shepherds, that kind of stuff. Like, a lot of these dogs have such an innate, built-in genetic drive for resource guarding. It's crazy, right? Because they use that in the protection sports. They use it to protect objects, to do all of this. And absolutely, while that can be trained, the more genetically ingrained it is, the better it's going to look, the better it's going to function, right? So resource guarding, again, I have never personally seen what I would call reactive resource guarding. That is purposeful. Territorial aggression, so we do see a lot of visitor aggression that I will classify as reactivity. Just a dog, under-socialized dog, very often. We had a lot of issues with this after all the COVID lockdowns here in Victoria and Melbourne, Australia, where I live, where we got basically locked up for 2 years, and a lot of people got dogs, but no one ever came to visit. So when we were fucking let out of our house prisons again, dogs lost their shit because they'd never experienced anyone else walking through the door, right? So that is kind of very often erratic behavior. But when I talk about territorial behavior, I talk more about a dog that's in the backyard and someone jumps the fence and that dog squares up to them and goes like, "Have you stepped into my territory, now you have to die." So I guess territorial aggression probably isn't the best example, because you do have fence fighting like I was talking about before. But some of the dogs that I've seen, that, like, those have been dogs where I cannot walk into the backyard unless the dog is leashed or muscled or I'm wearing protective bite gear, because that dog's coming for you and he's biting and he's latching onto you. I guess that is another common denominator as well. Like, reactive behavior tends to be nips. They'll make contact, They will bite, but proper true aggression will often latch on. They will crunch with their back teeth. They will shake. That again, they intend to harm, threaten, maim. Right? It is purposeful. But yeah, territorial aggression, like proper territorial aggression. I've seen many dogs, like, if I jump that fence, that Rottweiler is going to, like, I'll be fighting for my life. And you can see the difference between those dogs and the dog that is just going like, oh my God, someone's at the other end of the fence. Bah, 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 bah. Now, another really interesting aggression example I find is restraint. So dogs that haven't been taught to be restrained from puppies, and by restrained, I mean held, grabbed by the collar, had their paws touched, have their muzzle held closed for an eye inspection, like those kind of things. Or even dogs that haven't been prepared for grooming, right? Now I see so many videos of like these fucking intensely aggressive dogs that are being groomed, right? Because they are restrained, they are strung up on a leash, so they can't go anywhere. And the second they have their bum touched, like with a brush or whatever it may be, like, this is not something that is harming or provoking the dog. But they react with like full baring teeth, full open mouth, black eyes, and they're trying to bite. Like, they're really trying to hurt the groomer. And so restraint is an interesting one. Like, I actually nearly had my fingertip ripped off by a dog because I grabbed its collar. And this wasn't even an aggression case. This was just an overexcitable young Visa that when they opened the door, the dog came out at fucking Mach 5, launched into the air, hit me in the chest. And I grabbed its collar because I was going to give it a shake and say like, hey, don't do that anymore. And the dog turned around and broke pretty much every bone in the top part of my index finger, cut more than halfway through, ripped the nail out and everything. So that restraint, like, again, you could argue that that was reactive behavior because it reacted to something I did. But the fact that that dog had never learned to be restrained in any way, form, or shape, and it was in that heightened state of arousal, essentially a reactive state when I grabbed it, made it turn into full-fledged harm-intending aggression. And so that brings me to the next point, which is that reactivity can absolutely become proper aggression. And I want to tell you a story about a dog that I worked with, a dog called Hero. So Hero was they said a bull Arab, but I feel like he was too small to be a bull Arab, and he had a weird body shape. My best guess is that he would almost be like a bull Arab crossed with a whippet, maybe. But yeah, he was a typical bull breed, like brindle and white coloring. The bull breed kind of face and body, just a little bit skinnier than your average bull Arab. Now, Hero, he was, I think, about 2 years old when I first met him. And the reason why I was introduced to this dog was because one of my former students, who I've done a podcast with, which will be coming out, it's an amazing chat, so stay tuned for that one. But one of my former students, Carolina, he had come to one of her social walks, and she essentially contacted me and said like, dude, this dog's fucking out of control. Like, I don't know how to approach this. So I met up with Hero and his owners, which used to be his foster carers. So the story was Hero had come into foster care. at roughly 2 years old, if memory serves. And these two people had taken him in. They were kind of pretty inexperienced foster carers. I think they were first timers. So, not a dog that should be placed with them, but let's not fucking go down that rabbit hole. But anyways, this dog comes to them. He had at the time one registered nip. And when I say nip, I mean like he had never broken skin. He had bruised, he had made contact, but he hadn't actually done any damage. So that's what we knew about him. He was at the time quite fearful. Again, I'm just telling you what they told me. You'll understand why I'm telling this now. But yeah, he was quite shy. He was quite fearful, under-socialized. Same old story, really, of what's happening in the dog world in this fucking day and age. But they were then put in contact with a vet behaviorist and a force-free trainer. And over a 12-month period, this veterinary behaviorist and force-free trainer absolutely fucking destroyed this dog. They absolutely made him a monster. And this is why I fucking hate force-free trainers so much. Because they said you can never tell him no, because that's going to reinforce his fear. That's how fucking little these people understand of dogs and dog behavior. But anyways, before I get too angry, I'm just going to continue on. So the foster carers continued with the training that they've told, which is walk on a harness, muzzle him if you feel unsafe, give him treats when he's not trying to kill people, and pat him lots when he gets overly fucking reactive. And so what happened was this just created a fucking spiral. And the dog became more and more and more aggressive, to the point where he redirected onto the female foster carer and did some pretty serious damage, like latched onto her and held on and did some pretty serious damage. I think she had to go to the hospital. I can't remember what she told me about, stitches and things, but he got it pretty good. Now, by the time I got to meet this dog, he was hunting people on the street, right? So what we do know is that a lot of dogs that are fearful use aggression to try and drive away the trigger, right? To make themselves feel safe, because there is no bigger reinforcement in the world than feeling safe when you've been feeling unsafe. And as the foster carers were told to pander to this behavior, to encourage it by patting him, by soft talking to him, by giving him treats, they were actually telling him, you are right. You should start being more aggressive towards people. And so what happened over a 12-month period is this dog's fear overreaction. Once, it might have happened more times, but there was one recorded incident of that nip turned into full-fledged human hunting targeted aggression, where the dog could not leave the house without a muzzle because he would walk down the street, lock eyes with someone, and fucking go for their face, right? So meet up with these people, meet them at their house. They go inside. They have like this massive gate to try and stop him. He's trying to climb the gate to bite me in the face. I actually have video footage of all of this. But yeah, he was coming for me hard. I get them to put a slip lead on the dog. We walk outside. He's wearing muzzle. And because I had no protected gear at the time, I would have preferred to wear that, but just didn't have access to it at the time. I started approaching one of the owners, and he is kind of shying away a little bit, but then he locks eyes with me, and when I take one step closer, he launches. He doesn't growl, he doesn't warn, he doesn't do anything. He just flies through the air as I'm grabbing the leash, and he's targeting my head. Like, he's not even going for like a leg bite to try and get me to run away. He's targeting my face, despite wearing a big fucking muzzle. But I grab the leash and I string him up pretty fucking hard on the leash because I have to stop this behavior immediately because this dog was on death row. It was like, if we can't make progress today, this dog dies. And I gave him one very, very seriously heavy correction. And at that point, what happens is his brain cracks open again. And he's now been lulled into this false sense of security of, as long as I aggress first, I will be safe. So long as I'm on the attack always, I will feel safe. So at this point, we've taken a dog that had some basic reactivity and we've turned him into a fucking serial killer. Not we, like the fucking morons that worked with him for a year. And again, like the foster-carers, they were horrified by what I did because they have been so incredibly brainwashed. Never tell him no, never use aversive tools, let him walk on a harness, they didn't do, like, hide behind cart, blah, blah, blah. And they have just created this insane dog. And what happened after I gave him that correction is I shattered his worldview. So he went, fuck, the thing that has been working for the last 12 months is not working anymore because this guy, this big bearded, shaved head moron that is now holding the leash is fighting back and telling me not to do this. And so at that point, what happens is the fear comes back, right? And that's the thing. We have to understand that, especially in fear reactive behavior, if that is pandered to too much, that can turn into a dog that thinks it is control of the situation by being actively aggressive. And so now the fear comes back, but he stops trying to attack me. He tries to get as far away from me as possible. Now what happens is I just start walking. I just start walking up and down. Like, I'm not looking at him. I'm not threatening him in any way. Like, I'm not trying to impose myself on him. I'm like, hey, we're just going to go for a walk. So we start walking up and down. He's putting on the brakes. He's skidding across the bitumen. But then eventually he starts walking. And he tried to, like, he went for me from behind twice. And he muzzle punched me pretty hard. But trust me, anyone who wants to work with aggressive dogs, dude, getting muzzle punched is not pleasant, but it's a hell of a lot better than getting bitten. But yeah, he muzzle punched me like with full force 2 more times. I corrected him every time. I punished him severely for it because I'm like, no, you can't do this. And then we started walking. And he was walking. He was still not comfortable being naming, of course, because again, this is like someone that has been brainwashed into a religion, and then you shatter their worldview, and everything gets destroyed around them. They're like, I don't know who I am. I don't know how to exist. I don't know how to live in a society that doesn't have the structured rule of law that I've been living under for so long. And rebuilding that and coming back into a normal life after that is insanely hard work. Now, after he'd given up trying to attack me, we literally just went for a 40-minute walk around the block. And the first part of the walk, he was trying to get as far away from me as possible. He was putting on the brakes. Every time he put on the brakes, I just kept walking. I dragged him with me. He started walking again, right? Negative reinforcement, pressure comes on, pressure goes off. But after a little while, and I am going to say this as well, because I think that's probably important to understand, that when he started walking normally next to me and he kind of realized that I wasn't a threat to him anymore, he was still eye-fucking people on the street. People that were just walking towards us, he would lock eyes with and bare his teeth, like ready to attack. And I punished him. Guess what? I have to fucking tell it that's not the thing to do, buddy. So I corrected it, and I corrected him firmly because I had to save his life. He was on death row. And by the end of the walk, he is walking right next to me. His body's soft, his tail's wagging, he's sniffing. He's not concerned about me in the slightest. I start dropping food on the ground. He starts eating it through the muzzle. And dog's still alive. Last time I checked. This was a couple of years ago. So, yeah. I guess what I was trying to say there is that please do understand that if your dog begins displaying reactive behavior, if that isn't dealt with, if that isn't taken care of, if that isn't intervened and changed, it can lead to serious problems. So don't just let this shit go. Don't think that everything will be fine. Don't just love your dog into a lull and allow them to become the predator that they were intended to be, that we've stopped them from being through selective breeding and training. Intervene, get that dog back on track, and that is, best thing you can do. The sooner you do it, the easier it's going to be to turn around. But if you are going to get help, please go to a proper balanced trainer that actually knows what they're doing and has a proven track record. Don't go to some fucking maniac that is either hanging dogs off the ceiling or a force-free person that pats the dog into being fucking maniac. Get the right person. Look at their social media, see what they do, and just do it right. Do it once, do it right. Get on top of it. So, it has been a lot of shit fighting on social media recently, and I'm so tired of it. And unfortunately, that infected my podcast a little bit. But I'm going to stop rambling now. Reactivity is loud and erratic. Aggression is quiet and purposeful. That is my take on it. That's probably a good time to wrap it up. Hopefully everything got recorded. I don't know. The computer might explode from just having had too much to do. But if you're hearing this tomorrow, it worked. Yay. All right. Thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of Beastly Talks. I hope you enjoyed this rambling that I had. I hope it made a little bit of sense. We will get back to proper podcast at some point when I get my fucking computer back. But yeah, for the next few weeks, there might be another couple of short ones. I don't know what's going to happen. It might not happen at all. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. As always, now is the time for you to go train your dog. Goodbye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Beastly Talks. I hope you found it interesting and that you'll join me for the next one as well. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it so that more people can hear about it. Or if you think this particular episode would benefit a family member, friend or colleague, be sure to share it with them directly. You can follow me on social media at Viking Dog Trainer on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. Thank you for your support and keep training your dog.